Koppel, host of the Time for Coffee podcast, where you get first-hand career advice into the jobs and industries that interest you the most. And before we start today's show, I have a quick favor to ask you. If you haven't already, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd give us a rating and a review on iTunes. And if you're like me, you need to do it now because you'll forget later and because it's the best way to help others who may be in search of career advice to find this free resource. So press pause if you haven't done it and do it right now. I'll wait. Thanks so much and enjoy today's show. Hey there, Java Junkies. Welcome to another K-Cup mini episode of Time for Coffee. By the way, K-Cups come in 3 sizes, single, double, and triple shots, or roughly 1 minute, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes in length. So if you don't have time to throw back an entire caffeinated career conversation, these K-Cup mini episodes of T4C can give you a quick caffeinated fix, whether you're on the go or you only have a few minutes to binge. So grab your mug and take a chug, because it's time for a caffeinated career triple shot K-Cup with my guest, Dr. Stephen Gundry. Can you talk about your research that formed the foundation of the plant paradox, in which you got into something called lectins and what you discovered?
Yeah, so interestingly, going back, to my research at Yale, plants have a defense system against being eaten. And as strange as it may seem to people, plants do not want to be eaten. They have a life. They do not want their babies eaten, their seeds, but they can't run, hide, or fight. But they're chemists of incredible ability. So they can produce a defense against being eaten that causes the animal pain, suffering, doesn't thrive. And one of their defense systems is a protein that are called lectins. And most people have never heard of lectins, but most people have heard of gluten. And gluten happens to be a lectin. And glutens are sticky proteins that go looking for sugar molecules to stick to. And those sugar molecules line the lining of our gut. They line the lining of our joints. They line the spaces where one nerve talks to another nerve. They line the surface of our blood vessels. And lo and behold, if an animal eats a plant lectin and the animal isn't doing well or doesn't feel well or doesn't thrive, a smart animal says, every time I eat this plant or this plant baby, I'm not doing very well and I'm not going to eat this anymore. Plant wins, the animal wins, everybody's happy. Then humans arrive. Humans, as all of us know, are rather stupid. When we eat things that don't agree with us or cause heart disease, we keep eating them and get a stent or a coronary bypass. So what I set out to do is show, actually based originally on my research at Yale, that most of the compounds that we think are normal to eat only arrived in the human diet 10,000 years ago, when grains and beans were started to be eaten. And some of our favorite foods only arrived in our diet 500 years ago, when Columbus began trafficking in North and South American plant products, like peanuts, like tomatoes, like eggplant, like potatoes, like corn. These are all modern foods with lectins in them that we, the vast majority of us, have never seen except for 500 years. So that was the basis.
Thank you. So as you mentioned, lectins affect our bodies in not so great ways. Specifically, our gastrointestinal system. Maybe I shouldn't say specifically, but in addition to all the other parts of the body that you outlined there. And the gastrointestinal tract is also known as the gut. And there's something called the gut wall, which really is a misnomer because it's only about a cell thick. Why should we care, Dr. Gundry, if we have food particles that are permeating the gut wall and getting into our bloodstream?
Great question. And anyone who is at all worried about COVID actually ought to know that the reason pre-existing conditions are why people with pre-existing conditions are so susceptible to getting COVID and getting sick from COVID is that all pre-existing conditions are caused by leaky gut. And if that doesn't get your attention, nothing should. So 80% of our immune system lines our gut. And it's there because foreign particles shouldn't get through our wall. Think of it as the Great Wall of China, and the Mongolian horde shouldn't be coming across the wall. And when foreign invaders come across the wall, our immune system, which is our army, gets energized and causes inflammation. And in my current book, The Energy Paradox, the lack of energy is because our immune system is taking every last bit of energy and fuel to fight a continuous war that's occurring because the hordes are coming across our border.
And that's because of the lectins. The lectins are breaking down.
Yeah, there's a wonderful professor at Harvard now, Dr. Fasano, who actually proved that lectins are one of the major causes of leaky gut, of making holes in the wall. And he was able to demonstrate this. In fact, he recently wrote a paper that says all diseases are caused by leaky gut, period. And I totally agree with him.
So as someone who has been a passionate student of functional and integrative medicine for years, I'm talking about myself here, I thought I was eating a healthy diet, Dr. Gundry.
So did I.
And I realized, thanks to you, that I'm not. And what has also shocked me is that I clearly also have a leaky gut. And how do I know? Tell me if this resonates. I sleep about 8 or 9 hours a night, but when I wake up, I'm tired. And I go through the day, and more often than not, I feel tired and I have brain fog. Yeah. And I drink my cup of coffee, and I'm also on antidepressant medication because I've suffered from depression over the years. And as you say, in the energy paradox, you believe most Americans, like me, like you, have leaky gut.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well, luckily now there are sophisticated measurements of whether or not you're activating the triggers that open the little tight junctions. And you can show, I've published papers on this, Dr. Fasano's published papers, that if we remove the mischief makers that for most of us cause leaky gut, and we repair the wall of our gut, and the energy paradox teaches you how to do that, we can measure every 3 months, we do blood tests and show that, in fact, oh my gosh, it may take a while, but now, number one, your leaky gut is gone. But number two, all the other markers of inflammation that we can measure, like C-reactive protein, like I talk in the book, and they're gone. And I'll give you a great example today. I just saw a woman today in her 60s. She's a physician, and she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease that came out of the blue about a year ago. And interestingly enough, every time her well-meaning physicians would put her on Parkinson's drugs, she got worse. And she's going, this isn't jiving. And she's skinny. She's healthy. She's eaten a healthy diet. She's a health nut. So we got these leaky gut tests, and we also got brain tests, leaky brain tests. And as I talk about in the energy paradox, if you've got leaky gut, the odds are you have leaky brain. And you have neuroinflammation, which basically means that you're attacking your own brain. And I talk about this in the energy paradox. So long story short, we get these tests. And not only does she have big time leaky gut, which didn't surprise me, she's sensitive to a number of lectin containing foods, among which is corn. And she grew up in Iowa and loves corn. And then we look at her brain, and she has autoimmune attacks against the movement centers in her brain. So she more than likely has what's called gluten ataxia, or at the very best, she doesn't have Parkinson's. She has an autoimmune attack against her brain caused by her leaky gut. And so the exciting thing is, here's a 65-year-old woman who is basically on a walker and going, geez, this is my life. I'm a doctor. I'm 65. The medicines aren't working. So the exciting thing is, holy cow, now we know why that happened to you. And if you had asked me 15 years ago, I would have said it's pseudoscience. But now here's phenomenal evidence that the food that this woman was eating was the cause, of her Parkinson-like syndrome.
Dr. Gundry, I can guess some of our listeners who are still in college may be thinking, well, gosh, 65 is a long way off. What does this energy paradox have to do with me? How are the diet of our young listeners affecting their gut in such a way that it is affecting their ability to live with the kind of vitality that they would like to have?
Got off the phone yesterday with a recent graduate from a Southern university, and I won't embarrass him by saying that Southern University, but he had struggled all his life with irritable bowel, with allergies, with eczema, had trouble gaining weight, had lots of brain fog in college, and was really struggling with anxiety and depression in college. And he was on antidepressive meds, which seemed to even make him more brain foggy. And a year and a half ago, he discovered my book, The Plant Paradox. And within 6 months, he was off his antidepressants. He was gaining weight. He no longer had irritable bowel. And he's now married. And we were talking, and he called me. He says, I just want to tell you, I don't know, you don't know me, but you changed my life, because what I thought was just normal, suck it up, this is what I got to do, isn't normal. And actually, I wrote the energy paradox in the introduction. I was driving into Orange County to do a PBS promotion to make money for PBS, public television. And I got a call on my phone driving that the person who was going to interview me, a millennial, couldn't make it in because she just didn't have it in her to come in today. And I'm going, and I said, oh, geez, should I turn around? They said, no, we'll get somebody else. It'll be okay. But that resonated with me so much that this, very young person would go, I just don't have it in me to come into work today. to do this and just a simple interview. And I went, wow, maybe I've been naive about how deep this problem goes. And Dr. Daniel Amen, the famous psychiatrist, and I have talked extensively now, and we've become good friends. And he's convinced that much of our anxiety and depression and tiredness is coming from our gut, from a dysbiotic microbiome, from a leaky gut. And the whole idea that depression and anxiety is a mental illness, we probably got it wrong. It is a gut illness. And the really cool thing is, if we gave more attention to taking care of these hundreds of trillions of single-celled organisms that live in our gut, it's amazing what they can do to take care of us.
Thanks for tuning in to this K-Cup mini episode of Time for Coffee. If you want to listen to our entire caffeinated career conversation, please check out the show notes for this episode. Thanks so much for listening to this latest episode of T4C. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching services for confused college students and recent grads, feel free to check out the Time for Coffee website under the coaching tab at time4coffee.org or text me at 202-236-5712. That's 202-236-5712.